To get this out of the way first, this entire video will be my speculation of what could have happened. Feel free to disagree, but just don't be a dookie head about it. Also, this video will contain spoilers about basically the entire game, so if you don't want to get spoiled, get out of here now. Good old Vanderlindes, the big jolly family that we've come to love and enjoy, with big man Dutchie and wise Jose as the leaders, pussy slayer Arthur and hydrophobic Johnny Boyo as the main men. This gang has it all. We all love these goofies, except of course Micah, but as much as we love these guys, except Micah, Rockstar loves making our hearts break when we see our favorite character get packed up by gunshots. Lots of gunshots. By the time we get to chapter 6, the entire gang is just a sad excuse of its former self. Everyone hates each other, Dutch keeps yammering about his plan, and Arthur keeps coughing up his lungs. But what if everyone lived and nobody died? The Mac Brody survived, Jin lived, Sean, Hosea, Lenny, Molly, Grimshaw, Arthur. Shit, man, Rockstar, why do you do this to us? So to figure this out, I'm gonna go over each chapter to speculate what could have happened if all these goobers survived. Let's start with the boring ass Colter chapter, cause you know, we all love snow here. In the OG timeline, Mac and Jenny already died in the Blackwater Massacre, and Davey is barely holding on before passing away just as the crew get into shelter. RIP. In terms of story, their deaths don't really affect much. Davey and Mac are mentioned like twice after this, and Jenny's mentioned once, so yeah, they weren't important. But in my Duke timeline, Davey, Mac, and Jenny healthily join the Vanderlindes, so they barely escape the law. Mac and Davey can help on the first few missions again, and Jenny can be there for the Lenny Riz. The O'Driscoll camp raid and the Cornwall train heist would be too easy with the help of the Calendar boys. Them being alive also helps himself later on, so yeah. That's pretty much it for Colter though. It's just a short chapter, and again, the people that died in it weren't really important, so let's just get to the rest of the game. With no gang casualties in chapter 2, the OG timeline isn't really affected with the previous deaths. In the Duke timeline, Mac and Davey would have been more active in the heists. Dialogue demonstrates how violent the brothers were, so these heists would have been even bloodier. Especially if they both went to save Micah, Strawberry probably would have been decimated, never to be repopulated again. When Arthur first meets Agent Milton and Agent Ross, the feds could mention how Mac barely managed to escape their grasp. Milton will be more confrontational towards Arthur, maybe even threaten him right then and there. Lenny and Jenny would have grown closer, like what I mentioned in my Lenny short. Everything else would mostly stay the same. Maybe the Valentine shootout ends quicker with an extra Calendar boy there. As we all know, the added death here is Sean McGuire. Had his brains blown out by a sniper during the road shootout. In the OG timeline, his death is sort of an omen for what is to come for the Vanderlinde gang. It is the beginning of the end. But in my Dookie universe, his survival is just another stroke of luck for the Dutchie boys. The crew kill all of the Greys and make it back to camp, just barely holding on. Of course, blood feuds would still happen because Jackie Boy can't wield a gun yet. With an extra 3 gunmen, this mission would happen even quicker, maybe, again, bloodier probably. So with Jack in danger of being sent to yucky Italy, the still unscathed Vanderlindes make their way to Saint Denis Pissville. Another short one, but it's just that like these deaths don't matter until like chapter 4 where it actually starts getting, you know, crazy. The added deaths here are plenty. Kieran, Hosea, and Lenny. The deaths are pretty much the turning point in the story, as after this, the gang is just a mess. Everyone is grumpy and tensions are high. The entire bank robbery was a complete failure as none of the money was actually kept. But in my perfect timeline, the beginning of chapter 4 is still the same. The crew deal with Bronte and all that, failed trolley robbery, you know the deal. Instead of Kieran showing up looking a little worse for wear, he would have escaped his captors and ran back to camp. Hooting and hollering about what they did to him, the gang tries their best to comfort him. Unknowingly, the O'Driscolls followed Kieran back to camp and start opening fire into the house. Arthur and Sadie do their thing, slaughter some goobers. Kieran is shaken up but still alive. There's him safe. But now Hosers and Lenny, my boy. Same setup for the bank robbery, a maxed out crew of Arthur, John, Dutch, Charles, Lenny, Bill, Micah, Javier, Mac, Davey, Kieran, and Sean. Yeah, this is gonna go absolutely crazy. When Hosea is captured, all the guys get their dead eye going and shoot all the captors. We'll say Millie might as well die right here, so Hosea barely manages to escape the firefight and run inside the bank. The rest of the mission would follow the OG timeline. They hide in the apartment, sneak around the docks, all that. But to really hammer home the fact that this is a different perfect timeline, the ship they go on doesn't crash. They would actually end up in northern Cuba. This is the exact point where the timeline diverts, as the crew would never even know about Guarma or the revolution or anything going on there. Right, so this chapter 5 would have been completely different than the actual chapter 5. Dutch's plan to survive Cuba is to lie low and then hurry back to America once the heat is gone. It is very vague, so some gaps need to be filled in. Real quick history lesson though, during the late 1890s to early 1900s, Cuba was in the midst of a civil war. Cubans wanted freedom from the Spanish and Spain wanted their colony back under control. By 1899, the war was over and Cuba was free thanks to the US. Knowing how the US keeps its promises, the US then took over Cuba for itself. In terms of Red Dead 2, the gang would be recognized by US troops as the bank robbery just happened, and the troops had bigger fish to fry than worry about some stowaway criminals. So the gang could legitimately lay low and just hang out for a bit. Arthur's TB probably wouldn't have been as horrible as it was in the OG timeline. He would still be sick, but just possibly a bit stronger. After enough time passes by, the boys pay a captain off to take them back to the US. The crew lands at Van Horn Trading Post, finally back at their usual stomping grounds. The Lake K stuff will still happen, so the camp has to relocate to the eerie caves of Beaver Hollow. I can see this chapter being a bit more jolly than the chapter 6 Rockstar gave us. The entire gang would be alive and healthy. Sorry, Arthur. Since most peeps die at the end of chapter 6 in Rockstar's timeline, I'm just gonna say my timeline's chapter 6 is basically the same, just missing some events. John is still freed from Siska, though a few gunmen come along to help. Hosea would convince Dutch to not meddle with the native army business and to leave Cornwall alone. Colm O'Driscoll still swings because ain't no harm in that. Molly would be spared as Grimshaw decided to interrogate her more thoroughly, and they would find out Molly was just capping, and they leave her alone. Sadie would still go on a revenge quest because it really doesn't change much. The native side missions would have been way more peaceful with Charles there instead of Dutch, but the biggest change will be in the mission Our Best Selves. With the entire gang robbing this train, yes, I can see them easily overpowering the military. For story purposes, John is still shot off, but everyone else is fine. Hosea convinces Dutch that they need to save her and that the money can be trusted with someone. Let's say the Calendar brothers stay with the dough. Micah, Joe, Cleet angrily run off as they don't care, they only care about the money. With basically the entire gang running out to save Abigail, Milton does not stand a chance. He would still reveal Micah as un raton. Micah is still technically a gang member, but come on, they would not leave his ass alive. They would see him and they would open fire every gun they have just into him, making him look like Swiss cheese. The entire crew now rides out to Micah, and after some intense interrogations, they open fire on him again, making him look like Swiss cheese, looking like Red Dead 1 John. With that done and dusted, the crew can now complete their Tahiti plan and finally escape the US.
Tahiti. Tahiti. You're gonna be harvesting mangoes in Tahiti.
Epilogue would then be completely different. Arthur would unfortunately be dead at this point as his TB grew worse. Even Tahiti's holiness couldn't heal him. Hosea would probably also be dead just because he's old and he has some undisclosed lung disease. The crew mourn the men, but at least they can enjoy their island's seclusion. Since Tahiti was already a French colony at this point, I'm just gonna say that the Vanderlindes found some secret uncharted paradise. Everyone is safe and sound, just kind of hanging around. Jack grows up to be a mango planting farm boy. Happy endings all around. I'd say Dutch gets bored of this and tries to hassle everyone back into gang life, but most decline. Bill and Javier might take up the opportunity as they are loyal to Dutch, but I can see them just rejecting the idea. But at the end of the day, they make it. They made it. They're chilling on their paradise, just planting mangoes and enjoying the sun. Overall, the gang would be pretty happy if nobody died. But of course, this is only the perfect timeline, as the real timeline is full of death and sadness. Everyone dies too early and the sacrifices end up meaning nothing. Fuck this game for making me sad. God. That's all I have for this video. I gotta leave before, I start tearing up, so stay safe and goodbye.